Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Diplomacy in Northeast Asia is entering a critical moment. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is beginning a series of high-stakes summits with a visit to Japan and notably before heading to Washington. The unusual order of these meetings is seen as a deliberate signal to allies and rivals alike. At the same time, his administration has accelerated its diplomatic reset, naming new ambassadors to both Tokyo and Washington. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ishiba's recent expression of remorse on the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II has raised expectations for progress in relations. Now, with U.S. trade pressures mounting and trilateral security cooperation on the table, tomorrow's Seoul-Tokyo summit carries weight far beyond bilateral relations. To help us break this down, we're joined by Patrick Cronin, Asia-Pacific Security Chair at the Hudson Institute. A big welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Chae Eun-mi, Research Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So let's start right away. Dr. Chae, President Lee Jae-myung has named new ambassadors to the U.S. and Japan just ahead of a series of bilateral summits with Washington and Tokyo, signaling full-scale preparation. What does this rapid reshuffling of his foreign policy team actually tell us? And is it about projecting stability and continuity to the world? Do you think so?
Well, to be honest, I think they came a bit late. The former ambassador to major countries had already returned to their post by mid-July, and the positions in both the U.S. and Japan were left. And also, you know that during that time, Japan held its upper house election, but left the Ishiba cabinet in a very fragile state. And meanwhile, important tariff negotiations were underway with the United States. Of course, the embassies were run by charged affairs, but having no ambassador in place for more than a month, such a critical time was, in my view, a significant loss for the nations. So I'm sure the government had its reasons, but this goes against the emphasis on national interest and pragmatism that Lee Jae-myung administration has been highlighting. In fact, there were even growing concerns that the summit might be held without ambassadors in place. So I think it's fortunate that the appointment has finally been made. One more thing, that what stands out in that both U.S. and Japan ambassador are seasoned career diplomats. For example, Lee Hyuk, the former ambassador to Vietnam, who has now been named ambassador to Japan, has long been floated as a likely candidate since the start of the current administrations. When the government selects former diplomats for such posts, it typically suggests a preference for stable and predictable diplomacy. In the current international environment, where conditions can shift very quickly, this choice signals an intention to rely on experience and practical expertise to maintain consistency and steady management in foreign affairs.
Right. So even though it came a little bit late, it was definitely a very necessary move ahead of the summits. So we are expecting the Korea-Japan summit on August 23rd. It's quite unusual for a South Korean president to visit Japan before the U.S. Dr. Cronin, how should we read into this, and what message does this send to the broader international community?
Well, I think it's an accurate reflection that our geopolitical moment is quite disruptive and uncertain. And we have not only intensified competition among major powers, heightened technological competition, but the added uncertainty that the United States has thrown in by pressuring allies and others around the world on the trade rules and on tariffs. So I think these pressures, these geopolitical realities now heighten the importance of Japan-Korea relations. And we've seen this reflected, I think, both from pragmatism from the Democratic Party of Korea and Lee Jae-myung, but also from the LDP and obviously Prime Minister Ishiba is well prepared to keep advancing the bilateral relationship. I also think that this is a springboard for Lee Jae-myung's international diplomacy moment. He's had nearly 3 months now since the special election, and now he is embarking on some very significant diplomacy that will probably go from Japan to the United States to maybe the APEC summit that Korea will host in the end of October. And this period is a very formative moment for President Lee Jae-myung to shape the South Korean foreign policy under his lead.
Definitely a very critical moment as well. Now, ahead of the summit, we are aware that President Lee gave an interview to Japanese media saying he would respect the 2015 Comfort Women Agreement as a state-to-state promise. And at the same time, he stressed that sincere consolidation matters more than financial compensation, urging actually a genuine response from Tokyo. Dr. Choi, what kind of diplomatic signal is he really sending here?
Well, above all, I think it's as a step aimed at dispelling Japan's concern about Lee Jae-myung's administrations. From the beginning, there had been worries in Japan that once Lee took office, his government might overtune existing agreements and adopt a strong anti-Japanese stance. But since the launch of administrations, President Lee Jae-myung has been consistently extending gestures to goodwill toward Japan, which has been received quite positively in Japan. On top of that, the recent pledge, the major prior to the visit to Japan to honor past agreements in the name of policy consistency is important. This message will reassure Japan that it can be indeed place its trust to South Korea, and more specifically the Lee administration itself. In the longer run, I think this will help strengthen the foundation of the trust between the two countries.
Right, so we are talking about unresolved historical issues between the two countries. And so President Lee's approach towards that has been described as a two-track strategy, separating forward-looking cooperation from historical disputes. But in practice, Dr. Cronin, can this strategy actually deliver some meaningful diplomatic results?
Well, I think we saw it delivering results even before Lee Jae-myung came to power. That is, the determination to look forward is very strong in both Tokyo and Seoul because the challenges are immense. I don't think the symbolism, though, is easily filled in with sort of tangible deliverables in the short term. I think instead we're going to see a focus on sort of quiet diplomacy in terms of coordination on very tough issues. How do you coordinate North Korea policy when you have Lee Jae-myung wanting to freeze nuclear weapons in North Korea and North Korea not even wanting to talk to anybody? So that's going to be a challenge. How do you deal with the United States when it's pressuring Korea and Japan on tariffs and on burden shifting and increasing defense burdens? How do you coordinate on China policy when both Korea and Japan want to stand up to China and yet not provoke China? These and other challenges are immense, and I think the coordination factor here has been elevated, and I think that's really the key here. We're not supposed to look for big new investment deals or even a trade agreement between Korea and Japan in the short term, but rather a continuation of closer coordination on key security, economic, and technology issues, and that's very significant in itself.
Right, so maintaining the current level of coordination between the two countries would be even very meaningful as it. Now, Prime Minister Ishiba actually used his August 15th address, marking the 80th year since the end of World War II, to speak about, quote, remorse, or some call it regret, the first Japanese Prime Minister in 13 years to do so. So how might Japan's current domestic political climate actually shape the prospects for improving ties with Korea, Dr. Choi?
Well, at the ceremony, Prime Minister Ishiba used expressions such as "we must deeply ingrained in our hearts with the lessons and reflection from the war. And also we will carry forward the painful memories of the war and the pledge of never again and advance toward the last peace like that. It was, as you said, it was the first time in 13 years that the word remorse had been used in that context. But well, compared with the previous statements, like the 70th anniversary statement, which is known as the Abe statement, this is a bit different in nature. I mean, the statement of that kind is something formally adopted by the cabinet, which means it carries the full weight of the government policy. But in Prime Minister Ishiba's case, he reportedly wanted to issue such a cabinet-approved statement, but faced strong opposition from within the LDP. So as a result, he settled on delivering a personal message instead. His use of remorse at the August 15 memorial should be viewed in that light, as part of his personal initiative. The fact that he pushed ahead despite significant internal resistance suggests that this really reflects one's strong convictions. That said, it would be a mistake to interpret that this is representing the broader political climate changes in Japan or the mainstream positions of the ruling party. Even if it was framed as the Prime Minister's personal message, with many within the LDP remained uncomfortable with such a language being delivered from the office of the Prime Minister. So while there is a broad consensus in Japan on improving relations with South Korea, but when it comes to history issues, especially apology and the expression of remorse, it remains a highly divisive and sensitive and controversial issues, I think.
Right, of course. It would definitely be a very sensitive issue in and out of the country. So we'll have to keep watching on the developments. But let's circle back again to the Korea-Japan summit, upcoming summit. So since the two leaders agreed to restart shuttle diplomacy, Dr. Cronin, what kind of issues are we expecting to make agenda this time?
Well, I think we have to start with coordination on trade issues. Where can Korea and Japan cooperate further, both to keep the United States on side and happy enough, but at the same time mitigate the sort of detrimental effects of tariffs and the challenges to the economies and to the technology policies of Korea and Japan. And I think issues on shipbuilding, on semiconductor chips, on energy are all critical. I think you could look at very specific subset issues like nuclear energy. How are we going to run these increasingly AI-driven data centers without nuclear power? And that raises lots of other questions for both Korea and Japan and for the region. Second issue is really North Korea policy. Just getting assurance. I think Prime Minister Ishiba will want the assurance of Lee Jae-myung that there will continue to be very close coordination on whatever diplomacy happens. And of course, Lee Jae-myung, when he goes to the White House on Monday, he's going to want assurances from President Trump that the United States is also coordinating very closely with Seoul on any outreach to Kim Jong-un. So the North Korean coordination policy is very important. And then finally, just the wider global agenda is critical here. When you think about China policy or Russia, when you think about reaching out to India, the global South, there's no shortage of issues here for possible cooperation, but definitely the need for continued close coordination.
Right, so a lot of issues to talk about, but mostly trade and cooperation in terms of North Korea issues, as well as trilateral cooperation with the U.S. would be very important. Now, speaking of which, since the summit comes just before the South Korea-U.S. summit, many see it as a laying groundwork for highlighting trilateral cooperation among Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Dr. Cronin, can the strategy of emphasizing trilateral ties really translate translate into tangible results at the upcoming sit-down with President Trump?
Well, again, I don't think President Trump likes to deal with necessarily tangibles as much as broad ideas and vision setting. Nonetheless, critically important that this goes well. Both of these summits need to go well because all three countries need each other for maintaining deterrence in the region, for leverage against potential adversaries like North Korea, for dealing with China. And I think here there is a real opportunity for Lee Jae-myung to ensure that whatever is meant by alliance modernization doesn't come at the expense of the U.S.-Japan alliance or Japan's interests. So we need to make sure that alliance modernization works for all three of these countries. And this alliance modernization in many ways is a euphemism for America shifting burdens onto its allies to take more responsibility, to shoulder more costs. And how we do that, what's the command structure coming out of these summits? Not necessarily the next week, but in the coming months, what will be the command structure that's being recommended? Because this really will affect Korean security, Japanese security, regional security. So the coordination here, again, I have to emphasize just how important that is. And I hope that President Trump will be on good behavior and try to advance these things sincerely, because I think all three countries need to do that.
Right, it's a very important moment for all three parties. Now, finally, before we let you go, all this together, these back-to-back South Korea-Japan and South Korea-U.S. summits, these could reshape the diplomatic landscape of Northeast Asia. So looking on the long term, Dr. Choi, how do you see the future of Korea-Japan relations and the evolution of the trilateral cooperations with the U.S.?
Well, President Lee Jae-myung's visit to U.S. and Japan will spark a range of discussion covering security, the economy, culture, and people-to-people exchange, and science, technology, and more. So, of course, it's impossible to guarantee that no conflicts or disagreement will arise in the future between the countries. But the leaders of South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. will remain aware of challenges and they committed to managing them. I'm optimistic about the developments of Korea-Japan relation and also U.S.-Japan relations. This may be the positive outlook as further supported by the high levels of mutual goodwill and also the preferences to each other among the peoples of the three countries.
Mm-hmm. What about Dr. Cronin? Do you have anything to add to this?
Well, I think the good news is that the leg of this trilateral relationship between Japan and Korea is growing stronger. And so we have more of an equilateral triangle rather than isosceles triangle, where the U.S.-Japan and U.S.-Korea relations were always very strong, but the Japan-Korea was weaker. That's the good news. The harsher sort of reading on what might be happening in the future, though, is exactly how is the system integrated both in the region and globally when the United States is somewhat retrenching, when China wants to grow its role, and where Japan and Korea want to preserve their influence going forward. And those are imponderables that will be watched very closely for years to come.
Indeed. So this summit could set the course for regional diplomacy well beyond this year, shaping the future of Korea-Japan ties and also trilateral security as well. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Dr. Cronin.
Thank you.
And Dr. Choi, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.